What's up, everyone? It's Q from Retro Q Gaming, and I was a bit surprised to see that there was a Disgaea 5 demo released on Nintendo Switch today. That's not what this video is about, but just bear with me with my train of thought. So I was thinking about that game and that demo and other games in that genre, thinking along the likes of Final Fantasy Tactics and Fire Emblem and stuff like that. And then it got me thinking, and I was wondering, it's like, Fire Emblem. We haven't seen an Advance Wars game in a while. I mean, it's been a hot minute since we've seen an Advance Wars game. In fact, the last Advance Wars game was made 9 years ago, 2008. Advance Wars: Day of Ruin on the Nintendo DS. Now, I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with the Advance Wars series, or it's officially known as the Wars series. But there's a decent amount of games in the title. I mean, you've got Famicom Wars, Game Boy Wars Turbo, Super Famicom Wars, Game Boy Wars 2, Game Boy Wars 3, Advance Wars 2, Black Hole Rising, Advance Wars Dual Strike, Battalion Wars 2, and Advance Wars Days of Ruin. Now, fair enough, there's a decent amount of games spanning a decent amount of platforms on there, but let's be real, most people will know it, and the series has got its main critical acclaim from Advance Wars 2, Advance Wars Dual Strike, and Advance Wars Days of Ruin. So basically, from the Game Boy Advance, which is where the name Advance Wars came from, because when you think about it, Game Boy Advance, from then onwards, the handheld titles, because Battalion Wars and Battalion Wars 2 were Wii games. Actually, one was a GameCube game, and one was a Wii game. And those two weren't too great. They weren't well received. But the Advance Wars, the handheld series, worked really well. They're excellent games. And it's almost a crime that we haven't seen one in 9 years. 9 years, that's madness. And if you're wondering, yes, they're turn-based military-style shooters, which they work on a grid-based system very similar to Fire Emblem, which makes perfect sense considering that they're also made by Intelligent Systems, the guys who are currently making Fire Emblem games. So with the popularity of Fire Emblem, I can see why Nintendo just keep them pumping out Fire Emblem games. I mean, hell, a few days from now, the new Fire Emblem, well, we'll call it a new game even though it's a remake, but the new Fire Emblem game of Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia is out in a few days. And then they've already announced that there's going to be a Fire Emblem game for the first time on a home Nintendo console in like 10 years or so. I can't remember when the Wii version came out, but it's going to be on the Switch at some point next year. So we've that to look forward to as well, which is all good. The Fire Emblem games are pretty good. Actually, they're great, except for the Wii one. I wasn't really a fan. And Fire Emblem Fates was kind of hit or miss. But, I mean, Fire Emblem Awakening was fantastic. Fire Emblem on the versions on the DS and the Game Boy Advance were fantastic. The GameCube game, I think I've said, was great. And there was one more I meant to say. I forget what it was, but you get my point anyway. So, it would be nice to see a new entry in the Wars series. Now, fair enough, you could argue, like, well, first off, what would they put it on? 3DS Wars? That's very much possible. I mean, they've already got a 60 million strong install base of people who would buy it on there. What about, and even the name works pretty well, what about Switch Wars? Might sound a little bit strange, but it doesn't feel too far off. Switch Wars. I mean, 3DS Wars is a bit of a reach, but yeah, I think Switch Wars sounds good. And the kind of stuff that they could do with Intelligent Systems, man in the helm again. See, when you compare what you have to work with in the Fire Emblem universe, with horses and just things like that in general. Horses, fair enough, you've got flying Pegasus Knights, things like that. But move it to modern military side, and there's so much more they can work with. Just on different types of, obviously there's different types of ground units and all, there's trinities and triads and whatever, this beats that and this beats this, and there's different versions of indirect units and all. That can all be hashed out by them. They have well more experience in in high quality stuff of this caliber than I do. But I think it'd be nice to see. I mean, fair enough. We're getting a decent amount of Fire Emblem games. We have Fire Emblem Awakening a few years ago, massive critical acclaim. I fucking love Fire Emblem Awakening. Fire Emblem Fates, not so great, but still a decent enough game. We have Shadows of Valentia coming out in a few days. We've got a Switch Fire Emblem game at some point next year. So there's decent enough pace and all between them. But break it up once in a while. I think that would work really well, because everyone loves we'll call it the Wars series. Everyone loves the Advance Wars games. It's that simple. Everyone loves the Advance Wars games, especially nowadays with how popular and how new so many people are to Fire Emblem. You could get a whole new crowd and a whole new, we'll call it generation, because let's be real, it's been two, depending on what way you look at it, 2 generations. Hell, it's been 9 years since we've had an Advance Wars game. You're getting a whole new generation of gamers that may have fallen in love with Fire Emblem, that could be interested in your new Advance Wars, in your new 3DS Wars, in your new Switch Wars. So I think there's real potential, not just because it would be a quality game, but I think it would sell really well, because people have been asking for this for years. So the people who are already invested and established with the franchise would jump on a new title in this series. And you've got these people who are new to Fire Emblem, they like Fire Emblem, they're new to Intelligent Systems, and then they say, hey, wait a minute, Nintendo and Intelligent Systems are bringing out another different, very different game, similar enough, kind of, but very different to Fire Emblem. I'm going to check this out. And then, of course, they go and it's like, wow, I love this, I need more of this. And then, of course, for some reason they have a Wii U and they buy all their digital games. They buy the digital versions of them. And boom, they're hooked on Advance Wars and Fire Emblem for life. So that's just my opinion on it. I would love to see more games in the Wars series, preferably Switch Wars. I mean, I wouldn't say no to a 3DS Wars, but I would prefer Switch Wars. I think it would be a great opportunity to break up the almost, if dare I say, monotony of Fire Emblem games, even though they are good. But I think it would be nice to see a bit of a change. I mean, it's arguably the same style of gameplay from the same developer, but it would make a nice change of pace and a nice break. So we'll see how it goes. I don't expect anything. I wish Nintendo would prove me wrong at their digital event for E3 next month, whenever they do show it. I would love for something like this to happen, but I'm not holding my breath for it, because, well, I'll pass out and hit my head on the coffee table at that point. Anyway, let me know, have you any experience with the Advance Wars series, or with any of the Wars games in general, except Battalion Wars, because that's a very different kind of game, basically. But let's stay with the Advance Wars series on the Game Boy Advance and the Nintendo DS. Are you familiar with them? Have you played them? Do you love them? Would you be willing to give them a try? Do you think Intelligent Systems should just stick to Fire Emblem, or have you played Fire Emblem but you don't know about the Wars series, or have you known about it because of Fire Emblem but not got a chance to try it? Anything related to all of that, drop it in the comment section below. I'd love to hear someone's experience on a 2 quality series from a quality developer like this. So let me know all that in the comment section below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. You can follow me on Twitter, details in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the rest of the videos in this channel.